In the next few minutes, we will walk down into a hidden canyon on the edge of the Great Plains, where a quiet prairie creek has sliced clean through solid pink stone. This is Palisades State Park in southeastern South Dakota, and the walls rising around us are almost unimaginably old, older than the dinosaurs, older even than the first complex life on Earth. We are just south of the little railroad town of Garretson, only about 20 miles northeast of Sioux Falls. This is the eastern edge of a broad, tilted highland called the Dakotas prairies, high ground left behind by the glaciers. Winding across it is Split Rock Creek, and where that creek meets this band of ancient rock, it has carved the gorge we are about to explore. Palisades is one of the smallest state parks in South Dakota, just over 400 acres, yet also one of the most dramatic. It was set aside as a state park in 1972. What it lacks in size, it makes up for in scenery, because packed into these few hundred acres are cliffs, spires, and a canyon you would never expect out here on the open prairie. As the trail reaches the rim, the ground simply opens up. One moment you are walking flat grassland, and the next you stand at the edge of a chasm, sheer walls dropping to the creek below. These vertical faces of stone are the palisades that give the park its name, rising in places as much as 50 feet straight up from the water. Look closely at the rock, and its color is unmistakable, a warm rose and salmon pink, streaked with deep red and purple. This is Sioux quartzite, one of the hardest natural stones on the continent. It nearly rings when you strike it, and it has resisted erosion so stubbornly that it still stands here in cliffs, while all the softer rock around it wore away long ago. Run your hand along the wall and you can read how it formed. Fine grains of quartz sand, packed tightly, sparkle in the light, and in places you can still make out the ripples of ancient beaches frozen in the stone. What began as loose sand was buried, heated, and squeezed until the grains fused into a single glassy mass of quartzite. And its age is almost beyond imagining. This sand was laid down more than 1.5 billion years ago, around 1.7 billion years in the deep past, along the shores of a vanished sea. To put that in perspective, this rock formed more than 1 billion years before the first fish, long before any living thing had crawled onto land. That hardness is the whole reason this canyon exists. When Split Rock Creek reaches this band of quartzite, it cannot wander the way prairie streams usually do. Instead, it is forced to cut a narrow slot, grinding downward grain by grain across the ages, until it carved these steep, straight-sided walls that look almost too sharp to be natural. The creek itself is the quiet hero here. Split Rock Creek gathers its water from the farm country to the north, then slips through this gorge on its way south into Minnesota, where it feeds a state park of the very same name. It is not a large stream, but given a bed of stone and enough time, even a small creek becomes a patient sculptor. Down along the water, the scale of the walls truly sets in. Great blocks of pink quartzite lean out over the creek, split by deep vertical cracks and stacked like the stonework of an ancient fortress. In the calm stretches, the rose-colored cliffs reflect in the dark water, and the whole gorge glows in the afternoon light. The park is famous above all for two towers of rock rising from the creek, known as the King and the Queen. These are quartzite spires, tall fingers of stone left standing when the softer rock around them washed away. A short trail leads right to their feet, and for generations, visitors have craned their necks up at this royal pair guarding the canyon. Standing beneath them, you feel how deep time works. Every crack is a weakness the creek and the frost have been prying at for ages, and each spire is simply the piece that has held out longest. One distant day, even the King and Queen will fall. The canyon is not finished, it is still being carved, right now, grain by grain. Tucked within these quartzite layers lies something remarkable, thin seams of a soft red stone called catlinite or pipestone. Unlike the iron-hard rock around it, pipestone can be carved with simple tools, and for countless generations, it has been quarried by native nations to make sacred ceremonial pipes. The famous pipestone quarries lie not far from here, in this same ancient rock. This whole region is the ancestral homeland of the Oceti Sakowin, the Dakota and their relatives, who have lived across these prairies and river valleys since long before any map was drawn. To them, the pink stone and the sacred pipestone within it are not simply scenery, but a living part of their history. We walk here as guests in a long-honored landscape. When settlers reached Dakota territory in the 1800s, they too prized the pink rock, though for a different reason. Sioux quartzite is so tough that it was quarried all across this region for building stone and paving blocks. Whole nearby towns were raised from it, and its rose-colored surface still lines streets and foundations throughout the northern plains today. The creek drew people as well as the stone. Back in the 1870s, the water of Split Rock Creek was harnessed to turn a large flour and feed mill, one of the early industries that helped the town of Garretson take root. For a time, this quiet canyon hummed with the grinding of grain, the water providing power for the settlers. For years, this remained a beloved local gathering place, a spot for picnics, swimming, and Sunday outings among the cliffs. Then in 1972, South Dakota set the land aside as Palisades State Park, protecting the gorge, the spires, and the creek for everyone. What had been a private wonder became a public one, open to anyone who walks down. Today, a network of short trails threads through the park. None of them is long, but each one delivers. Some run right along the base of the cliffs, close enough to trail your fingers on the stone. Others climb to the rim for a view straight down into the gorge. In an hour or two, you can take in almost the whole park. Those sheer, grippy quartzite walls have also made Palisades one of the finest rock climbing spots in this part of the country. On a warm weekend, you will often see climbers roped to the cliffs, testing themselves on the same faces the creek has worked for 1 billion years. The rough, solid stone offers superb grip, with roots from gentle to genuinely hard. The canyon is alive as well as ancient. In the cool shade at the bottom, ferns and mosses cling to the rock, and lichens paint the pink walls in soft grays and greens. Birds nest in the high crevices, deer move through the wooded draws, and the creek carries its own small world of fish and turtles, a green ribbon of shelter through the prairie. Climb back to the rim, and the contrast is startling. Up here, the wind moves across restored native grassland, big bluestem and prairie flowers waving under an enormous sky. Palisades sits right at the meeting of two worlds, the open tallgrass prairie above and the cool, sheltered canyon below, and that meeting is much of what makes it special. Every season reshapes this place. In summer, the swimming holes fill with families. In spring, the creek runs high with snowmelt. And in autumn, as we see it now, the oaks and sumacs set the rim ablaze in red and gold above the pink stone. Even in deep winter, ice drapes the cliffs, and the frozen creek turns the gorge into a fairy tale. And Palisades is not the only wonder carved into this rock. Just a short distance to the north, on the very same split rock creek, lies a second, even narrower chasm called Devils Gulch. If the Palisades are grand and open, the gulch is tight and secretive, a slot in the earth barely wide enough to bridge, with pink walls plunging to dark water below. Standing on the little footbridge that now spans it, you look straight down into a cleft so narrow and so deep it seems almost unreal, the creek whispering somewhere in the shadow below. It is easy to see why a place this strange and dramatic, out on the open prairie, would gather stories, and Devils Gulch has gathered a truly famous one. The tale goes back to September of 1876. The outlaw Jesse James and his gang had just botched a bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota, and were fleeing west with posses on their trail. As the story is told, A cornered Jesse spurred his horse straight at this chasm and leapt clear across it, some 18 feet, escaping his pursuers and riding into legend. Did it really happen? Historians are doubtful, and the timeline of the escape makes the famous leap hard to prove. But there is no question the James gang passed through this country in those weeks, and a good legend, once it finds the perfect setting, is nearly impossible to kill. Today, a bridge and a marker let you stand right where Jesse supposedly jumped. Palisades and Devils Gulch together tell one remarkable story, a story of almost unimaginable time, of ancient seas and hardened stone, of sacred pipestone and prairie nations, of settlers, quarries, mills, and outlaws, all written into a single band of billion-year-old pink rock. Few places pack so much wonder into so small a space, hidden in plain sight. Thank you for walking down into the canyon with us today. If you enjoyed this journey through the pink quartzite gorges of Palisades and Devils Gulch, consider subscribing and following along. There is a whole world of wild and storied places still waiting to be explored, and we would love for you to keep discovering it with us, one trail at a time.